Very special guest, Linda Yauk, representing Integris Bass Diabetes Center. Linda is a registered dietitian, as we said a few moments ago, and a certified diabetes educator. So again, welcome. One of the key reasons you're here is I understand that November is Diabetes Awareness Month. So thank you for being here. And we've got a whole bunch of questions, and here we go.
Okay, great.
Starting us off, I know a lot of people don't know a ton about diabetes, at least I don't, but I have heard of type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about the differences between those two?
Sure. Diabetes, type 1 and type 2, the same end result for all, but definitely a different treatment modality. Type 1 is actually an autoimmune disease, where the body sees the part of the pancreas that produces insulin as foreign, like a virus, and it goes down and it destroys that part of the pancreas, and so the body is no longer able to produce enough insulin, if any at all. And so those individuals with type 1, which is only about 5% of all the people with diabetes, require insulin to live. And it's my job to kind of teach them to think like a pancreas. They have to replace the insulin that their body would normally release when they eat a meal. And so that requires lots of different injections and monitoring blood sugars. And luckily we've come a long ways with technology and tools to make it a lot easier to manage type 1. Type 2 is definitely the more common type of diabetes. It is hereditary, as our bow tie man was saying. We have a lot of Native Americans. People of color and Native Americans have a disproportional high risk for type 2 diabetes. So that's a big population here in Oklahoma. So it's more of an insulin resistance issue, where our body produces the insulin, but it's just not working effectively. And that kind of is brought on sometimes, a lot of times, by our lifestyles, like the puppy that wouldn't get up, that was inactive. That's really kind of the number one thing that really causes our insulin to not be as working to do the job that it should do. And so it becomes this negative snowball. So then our bodies are resistant to the insulin our body's producing, and that causes our pancreas to produce more insulin, thinking, oh, the more I produce, then that will help keep my sugar level at a safe range. So then our body produces all this extra insulin, and insulin is a fat storage hormone. So then we start to accumulate extra fat. So it's very easy to put on weight, and particularly weight in the middle. And sometimes people are just like, oh, I just must be eating more, or I'm getting older. They just kind of blow off that the scale has continued to rise throughout the years. And that could really be a precursor saying, you know, you have insulin resistance, which is the hallmark of type 2 diabetes.
Linda, in preparation for this morning's visit, I did just brief research, and it said around 30 million people have diabetes. So how big a problem is it? We have a population in the U.S. of 350 million, I think, something close to that. So 30 million have it. Sounds significant problem to me.
Right. It is a big issue. It's the underlying cause, and it's not really just diabetes. This is kind of like a really big pet peeve of mine. You hear, oh, diabetes, it's the #1 leading cause of amputation, blindness, and kidney disease. And it's not diabetes, it's unmanaged diabetes.
Okay.
If a person,
that makes sense.
If a person can keep their diabetes managed, meaning keeping their levels within a safe range for blood pressure and cholesterol and sugar, they're not at any increased risk for issues than someone who doesn't have diabetes. But a lot of times people are walking around and don't know they have elevated blood sugars until they have a heart attack, and then they're like, oh, you've had diabetes, and probably have had it for several years. And so that's really where the health implication comes, is people just didn't know they had high blood sugar, and these 30 million are people that actually know it. There's thought to be a lot more, 1 in 3 having pre-diabetes, having those very beginning stages of type 2 diabetes that don't even know it. So it is a significant health issue, and we are less active as a nation, and we are getting larger because just several factors. So it is a health issue for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned prediabetes a few times, and you gave us that cute video of the dogs with the prediabetes test.
Right.
Is that the only way to take the test? Is it just those few questions, or should you go see the doctor to take the prediabetes test?
Well, that's just an easy way to kind of get the message out, is like, hey, you know, yeah, I had five of those risk factors. But yes, the doctor can actually run a blood test, a couple of different blood tests to determine if your sugar levels have been elevated for the previous 2 to 3 months, a test called a hemoglobin A1C, or they can just do a fasting blood sugar test in the office or at the lab. And after two tests that show that your numbers are above this considered to be safe range, then that would be a diagnosis of prediabetes. Depending on where it falls, there's the normal range, and then there's a range that's pre-diabetes, and then above that is actual diagnosis of diabetes.
Linda, can type 2 diabetes, I guess it can be delayed or prevented. I guess the better word, it can be managed.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. Right.
And 2 ways to manage it. There was probably 20, but what would be 2 quick
Right,
ways, real quick?
Great. Well, that's so. With all this people developing diabetes, Congress was enacted. CD, said, hey, can we do something to help people not develop type 2 diabetes? So CDC did lots of different research and showed that yes, type 2 diabetes could be delayed and prevented for up to at least 10 years, cut the risk by at least 50%, and weight loss, and not a significant amount of weight loss that first year, 5 to 7% weight loss, and maintaining that weight loss throughout the years was one huge area. And then the second was accumulating 150 minutes of physical activity a week, not a day, but a week. So those we feel like are really 2 realistic things that we could do, losing 5 to 7% of our body weight and exercising 150 minutes a week to delay that onset. Because once you develop diabetes, it becomes burdensome in many ways.
Yes, I have one more question for you about, so we've talked a lot about how it physically can cost you to have diabetes, but what about like medical costs and lost wages? Are those pretty common with diabetes?
Yes, definitely. 2 to 3 times more is spent for the individual who actually develops diabetes, an average of about $17,000 annually a year more for medical costs. So prevention is key.
Linda, I noticed in the research for our show this morning that Integris Bass is one of 5 nationally recognized programs in the state.
Yes.
That's impressive. So tell us we've got about 30 seconds to tell us about that.
Okay, well, great. Yes, we're one of 5 to actually be able to offer a diabetes prevention program. We started that about 3 years ago, and we want to get the word out that is a program that Integris does offer. I can come to businesses and work with your employees for diabetes prevention. It's an evidence-based program. We have some really, really good outcomes, and we just would love to be able to offer that to people. We're going to start a new series in January, so we'll keep you posted on that.
And I wasn't looking, Linda, but did we have your contact information on the screen, or was there a graphic for that? There we go. There you are.
Yes.
Okay. So give Linda a call at that number. And you said in January you start a new...
We'll start a new series
Okay.
of sessions.
All right.